Welcome to HP Fanfiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Nymphadora Tonks smiled sadly as she appeared at the gates of Hogwarts to begin her new assignment. Dumbledore had expressed his concerns of the Goblet of Fire having been tampered with and potential conflict arising between certain groups within the castle, and thus, given that she had been working with Mad-Eye prior, she had been sent to keep the peace to ensure the tournament would run as smoothly as possible. She was not displeased with the role. Another year under the tutelage of Moody would be a boon after all, but her years at Hogwarts could be described as turbulent at best, and the memories she had fought to repress over the last couple of years since leaving surfaced once more. Everything had been as wonderful as expected when she first arrived. She had been sorted into Hufflepuff like her father before her, and she made fast friends with her peers. She excelled in most of her classes and was even well liked by the staff, but her problems all began and ended with her abilities. In the beginning, she was sought out by students and staff alike, all fascinated by what she was and what she was capable of. She would happily demonstrate what she could do and change her hair, her eyes, and anything else requested of her, a gift that became a curse as time went by. Third year arrived and things changed exponentially. It began with muttered conversations and hostile glances from her female classmates, speculating that she was changing the way she looked to impress their male counterparts, enhancing certain assets to gain attention, and the outright accusations followed soon after. To the 13-year-old girl, it seemed both petty and ridiculous. She was not even aware that she could perform such changes until much later, not that any would believe her protestations of innocence. It took her a while, but she soon realized her friends were jealous of her. In an attempt to stem the glances of disdain, she made a conscious effort to appear as plain or average as possible. She wore her hair in only natural colors and manipulated her features to blend in with the status quo, but it was to no avail. The accusations against herself and her assets, being purposely accentuated, continued. Although she would never admit it to any, it hurt the young metamorph to think that those she considered her friends would think such things of her. Many nights as a teenager were spent crying as much as she tried not to, wishing that she was normal. It was when she arrived for her 5th year of schooling that she decided she would no longer care, no longer attempt to cater to the envy of the others. The looks she adopted became more outlandish, her hairstyles more daring, and features more prominently individual, very reminiscent of the style she wore to this very day. She wore it like armor, and became almost exactly what she had spent the past 2 years denying. The females of the school had made her a martyr, and she decided to play the role that had thrust upon her. The boldness of her move attracted the attention of the opposite sex, something that she had not taken into consideration whilst contemplating it, and a school full of hormonal boys caused much more trouble and heartache than she could have envisioned. Reflecting on this, she knew that she had been naive and had underestimated the lengths that some would go to get what they wanted. That particular plight had started with seemingly inane questions on what exactly she could change about herself. The scramble to date her followed shortly after. Unbeknownst to the girl, a lesson she would learn much later, the vying for her affection was not because of the outward and bubbly personality she projected, but the abilities she possessed. The males had figured out that she could become almost anything they desired, and she was revered for it, sought after, quite the change from being the one treated with contempt that she had become accustomed to. Such attention had overwhelmed and confused her at first, but she took it in her stride as best she could. She eventually agreed to a few dates that all ended the same way, with each of the boys asking her to change certain things to please them. After experiencing this, she avoided it. To shield herself from the advances, she became more extroverted, the outwardly full-on woman she grew into being now. She found that overwhelming the boys with her talents, though drawing more ire from the females, was the best defense. It was her putting them on the back foot now, and it protected her from the inadequacy she felt when asked to make changes to her appearance for the sake of shallow aesthetics. Only once did she allow her guard to drop, something she vowed to never let happen again when she became aware of the circumstances. Michael Jones, a fellow half of a year her senior, had had her attention since third year. He was handsome, strong, a beater on the Quidditch team and very bright with it. He had approached and asked her for a date quite out of the blue, and the enamored girl had agreed after much hesitation. He had always been respectful towards her, had even helped her a few times with schoolwork, and had expressed little interest in her skills over the years. She had been rather nervous about dating due to how the others had ended, but felt no reason to shy away from who she believed to be one of the few nicer guys in the school, and so began her one and only true investment in another. One that treated her as a normal person, did not ask that she change a thing about herself. One that took the eccentricities she exhibited with little more than a shrug, and had she not overheard the conversation between himself and a few members of the Quidditch team, the one she would have gladly given herself to. It was late one evening after practice that she entered the changing rooms. Being December, it was chilly outside, so she opted to wait for Michael in the female side of the room. The two were separated by screens for the purpose of modesty, but that did not prevent her hearing the talking taking place on the other side. "So, how's it going with the Tonks girl, Jones?" Nymphadora recognized the voice as belonging to Daniel Roberts, the other beater on the team. "Well enough," Michael answered coyly. "Another few weeks should do it." Tonks frowned as she edged closer to the screen, flinching away slightly as the other boy laughed uproariously. "Good man," he praised. "You'll be 10 galleons richer if you pull it off." Nymphadora felt her heart sink at the words. Yeah, Michael sighed. "Cheer up, Mike. You'll be the first to finally get her." She heard the other boy huff as the first tear fell. "She's not so bad," Michael muttered. She's not Melanie," Daniel finished. "Ah, come of it. A part of doing this is so you could get over her." He let out a sound of disappointment. "You were all for it. You wanted to see if she would live up to her name of being a little nymph." Nymphadora heard nothing else as she backed out of the room, both devastated and furious. She'd always experienced teasing for the name her mother had bestowed upon her, but nothing that made her feel as dirty as this. She spent that night crying unashamedly at the treatment, cursed both Michael and Roberts for the slight the next morning, and became outright hostile towards any that even uttered her accursed name. She was Tonks, and that is all she would ever allow herself to be referred to. The experience hurt her beyond measure, but instead of allowing it to define her, she used it. It kept her centered during the many lonely hours she spent preparing herself for her exams so that she could be an aura. She grew from it and became a stronger person, and thrived on the progress she made. When her newts eventually came around, she was ready. The hours of preparation, the years of solitude all culminated in the success that followed. She achieved the required grades and was accepted into the academy only a few days after her application had been submitted, and she left Hogwarts behind to begin a new venture, one where her talents would be appreciated for what they were and not what others could gain from them. Or so she thought. It took very little time of being in the academy before she was subjected to the same jealous stares from the females and the lecherous ones from the men. She once again felt like a schoolgirl until she met the more experienced members of staff and found a kinship of sorts with the older people. Moody had taken her under his wing immediately when he witnessed the potential she possessed with her wand, much to the surprise of the senior auras, whom had never seen the man take such an interest in a recruit before. Both Madame Bones and Kingsley treated her as they would any other hopeful and quickly earned her respect also. Neither had any other expectations of her than to be the best she could, nor looked upon her any differently because of her capabilities, and the fate and respect she received from them made everything else much easier to endure. She was, however, still Tonks and always would be. She had dropped that guard once and paid dearly for it. She would not make that mistake again. When she had learnt of her assignment, she convinced herself that she could handle it. She was no longer the young girl that would cry because of the way others perceived her. She was a woman now, stronger, but she could not shake the vulnerability she felt in the moment she looked upon the place where most of the hurt had happened. So she did what she always did when she felt such a way. She brightened her hair a few shades bolder, accentuated her feminine assets more, and adopted the flirty persona that frightened off the most determined of men. None would ever guess that she was lacking in experience by how she carried herself, nor the way she acted, but it was the best way she knew to maintain her self-preservation. It had become second nature to the metamorph and was simply who she was to all, to those that both knew and didn't know her respectively. It was an exhausted Sirius Black that exited the rooms that himself and the rest of Harry's entourage had been assigned. For the better part of the past 4 days he, along with Harry, Leo and Cassiopeia, had been sequestered within, developing a strategy to deal with the dragon in the upcoming first task of the tournament. The planning was still in progress, and the sense of dread that had settled in since the revelation of Harry's name being selected had only increased since their arrival at the school. He had no doubt that Harry would perform admirably, but he lacked any kind of faith in any other elements involved, particularly the unknown person or persons that had submitted the name in the first place. He took a deep breath as he made his way to the entrance hall, craving fresh air and a reprieve from the discussion of dragons. So lost in the plight of the boy, he did not notice the approaching figure, ascending the stairs he was walking down until he inadvertently bumped into them. "Sorry," he muttered half-heartedly. "Sirius," the voice called as he continued on his way. He looked up, only for his eyes to narrow as he met the nervous stare of James Potter. "Potter," he greeted curtly. James dragged a hand through his hair as he gave a weak smile, his expression almost pleading. "Can we talk, please?" Sirius sighed and shook his head. "I don't want to argue, Pads. Please, I just have a few things to say." Reluctantly, Sirius nodded and gestured for the man to lead the way. James nodded gratefully as he opened a classroom door in the corridor that Sirius had just exited. Seeing that it was empty, he entered and waited for Sirius to follow before locking the door and casting a few privacy charms. A rather uncomfortable silence settled amongst the duo as James attempted to find the words to convey what it was he needed to say to his former friend. "How are you, Sirius?" he asked in an effort to break the tension. Sirius again shook his head. "What is it you want to say, Prongs?" James nodded stiffly as he swallowed. "First of all, I want to apologize for everything. Whatever happened, there was never a reason for things to turn out as they did. I'm not going to make any excuses for what we did. It's inexcusable, but for what it is worth, I really am sorry." Sirius nodded his acceptance as he leaned heavily on a nearby desk. "It's not all your fault," he mumbled. "Dumbledore played his games with me too, and if it wasn't for Cassie, I doubt I ever would have found Harry." "How is he?" James questioned worriedly. Sirius narrowed his eyes once more and deflated considerably. "It's been hard, Prongs," he answered. "When we found him, he choked and fought to gain his composure. He was living in a cupboard, neglected, beaten, and in his own filth. We barely managed to save him." James was nothing short of horrified, his emotions a mix of heartbreak and righteous fury. He grabbed a desk to his left and threw it against the wall as he screamed. He shook uncontrollably as he thought of one of his children in such a state and looked at his friend, more grateful for the man than he could put into words. Without warning, he closed the gap between them and wrapped his arms around him, squeezing tightly. "Thank you," he whispered fiercely. "Thank you for being there for him." Sirius stiffened at the contact, unsure on how to react. He was torn between punching the man and comforting him. Not a day passed that he did not think of how he had taken custody of Harry and the deplorable state he had rescued him from. "We got him, James, that's all that matters," he sighed. James pulled away and nodded as he gripped the man's shoulders, unsure of how he was going to explain this to his wife. Her sister had never been a pleasant woman, but outright abuse was something else entirely. "Really, thank you, Sirius," he reiterated. "There's nothing I could ever do to repay what you did." "I am his godfather," Sirius replied simply. "I only did what I swore I would the day he was born." James nodded appreciatively. "How is he, really?" he asked further. "How did you fix the issues with his magic?" Sirius released a deep breath as he contemplated how much he wanted to say. James Potter was certainly not his favorite person, and he did not want to betray Harry's trust. The whole magic thing was a big deal for Harry, he began wearily. It still is. We were honest with him from the start and told him that it would not be possible to use magic the way we do. He took it in his stride, but I could see that it bothered him when all he could learn was potions and anything else that didn't require a wand. He rubbed his eyes tiredly and took a steadying breath. He was 7 when we were in Egypt visiting some old tombs. I don't know what happened, but he got too close to a ritual table of some sort and it did something to him. He swallowed deeply as he relived the memory of Harry being suspended in the air and the helplessness he felt. I almost lost him, James. If it weren't for Cassie and my grandfather helping with the blood, I would have. He finished fearfully. Is that why he looks like you? James questioned. Sirius shrugged. I don't know what happened to him. It must have been a blood adoption of some kind. He registered as both a Potter and a Black when we tested him, but no one can tell us anything definitive. James nodded in acceptance. As long as he is okay, that's all that matters. He's incredible, James, Sirius whispered. He may look like us Blacks, but there's a lot of both you and Lily in him. He makes me proud every single day. He's smarter than we ever were and more skilled with a wand. I haven't beaten him in a duel for almost 2 years, he admitted sheepishly. James chuckled as he was filled with pride for his eldest. I'm glad, he replied sincerely, but not really surprised. He was performing accidental magic from when he was 8 months old. I still remember when he levitated his full nappy and dropped it on Lila's head. Sirius snorted at the memory. That little giggle of his always meant trouble for someone, he mused aloud. James nodded, the grin he wore slipping into a hard line. I don't expect you to forgive me, Padfoot, but for what it is worth, I just wanted to say I'm sorry and to thank you. The one thing I got right was picking you to be his godfather. You've been a better father than I ever could have ever hoped to be. Sirius shrugged once. It's not been easy, he muttered, but worth every minute. James nodded. After what he has experienced, I understand why he hates us, he sighed. Sirius's expression became grim at his words. He had it rough, James, and it's not something he's ever gotten over. He may seem like he has, but I know that it still bothers him. He's a closed book when it comes to how he feels, and he has real intimacy issues because of it. It took months of him being with us to relax, and he doesn't let many close to him. But he's a good kid and bloody dangerous to get on the wrong side of, he finished ruefully. I don't plan on doing that, James assured him. Sirius huffed as he shook his head, unsure on if he was making a mistake in giving James the chance to atone for his past actions. He's not a forgiving person, and I doubt he will come around, but if he does decide to talk to you, be patient with him, let him get what he has to off his chest, and be completely honest with him. He will not appreciate being lied to, he finished warningly. James offered a weak smile. Thank you, he replied seriously. We will wait until he comes to us if he chooses to. Sirius nodded stiffly as he removed the charms and unlocked the door. Don't give me any reason to regret this, James, he advised as he left, the need for a few moments of solace greater than when he had left his rooms a short while ago. Thankfully, he was not hindered by any other distractions as he made his way through the castle and into the grounds, breathing in deeply as he took in the familiar surroundings. The desired peace, however, did not last as long as he hoped. Lost in thought, his legs had carried him near to the front gates and into the path of a red-robed Auror. Having been at their mercy on a few occasions in his youth, he was not keen on crossing paths with one in his current mood. Sirius Black? A female voice questioned. The man cursed under his breath as he turned to face her, realizing quickly that she was far too young to have been on the wrong side during any of his escapades. Yes, he replied with a suspicious scowl. The woman smiled excitedly, her pink hair shifting between colors as she bounced on her toes. Nymphadora? He queried, pleasantly surprised by the appearance of his young cousin. Bloody hell, I haven't seen you since you were running around the garden in your knickers and making a nuisance of yourself, he chuckled as he pulled the now flushing woman into a tight embrace. It's just Tonks, Sirius, she said firmly as she returned the hug. Sirius pushed her away gently and frowned at the stubborn look that adorned her face. Shrugging dismissively, he smiled once more. Whatever you say, he laughed. An aura? He questioned unnecessarily, nodding towards the robes. Tonks nodded proudly. It's all I ever wanted to be, she returned happily. What are you doing here then? He questioned, with a slight frown. Tonks sighed. This is my new assignment for the year. Dumbledore requested aura presence. He's not happy about Potter's name coming out of the goblet, and Amelia decided I was the best for the job, as I'm the youngest and was taught by Moody, she explained with a shake of her head. He's not a Potter, Sirius corrected firmly. He was raised a Black and has our name. Tonks nodded apologetically, taken aback by the ferocity of his words. Sorry, Sirius. I only know what's been printed. The man grumbled under breath briefly before waving off her apology. It's fine, he assured her. We should catch up properly, though, when you get some time. Our rooms are behind the portrait of Sir Cadogan. You're welcome any time, he offered with a warm smile. I'd love to, Tonks replied. I have to check in with Dumbledore, but can come after if you like. Sirius nodded, his smile widening at her eagerness. Arcturus isn't here and I can deal with Cassie. You know that I never had any issue with your mother and father, don't you? Tonks grimaced at the mention of the other members of the Black family but nodded her understanding. I know, Sirius. Mum was really hurt that you didn't stay in touch after everything happened. Sirius let out a deep breath. I will write to her, he promised. So much happened and I wanted to forget all about this place. It's not me that you owe an explanation to, Tonks pointed out. She'll be mad as hell with you, but I know she misses you. Sirius shook his head as he remembered the fiery nature of his cousin. She was the politest, but still not one to upset. I'll fix it, he sighed. Tonks smiled brightly at his declaration. Well, I will check in with Dumbledore and see you soon? Sirius nodded. It's good to see you, Nime Tonks, he corrected when he noted her glare. You too, Sirius, she replied cheerfully, as she turned and headed towards the castle. Sirius watched her retreating form fondly. He had always been entertained by the girl when he had visited her. She had always been rather rambunctious, and he could only imagine the trouble she had caused Andy and Ted growing up. That fella really wants to hate you, Leo whispered to Harry from his left. With Sirius taking a break, the duo decided to attend one of the many classes on offer at Hogwarts, and at the insistence of Harry, had made their way to join the 6th-year Gryffindors and Slytherins in the dungeons for their lesson. The potions professor had begrudgingly permitted them to join and had taken the opportunity to fire some rather obscure questions at Harry only moments after they had settled. The more questions he asked that were answered, the more the man became irritated, the vein in his temple throbbing prominently. Harry, the ever-respectful boy he was, answered them all, much to the man's chagrin. It seems that you inherited your mother's ability when it comes to this subject, he conceded, taking glee in the flinching of the young man before him at the mention of the woman. Satisfied by the reaction, the greasy-haired professor set the students' work, tasking them to brew the draught of living death. Having gathered the required ingredients from the cupboard, they began in silence, the only sounds audible being the crackling of the flames beneath the cauldrons and steady sounds of chopping. After what happened between him, Sirius, and the rest of them at school, are not surprised, Harry muttered in response. Leo shrugged. There's a man who holds a grudge, unless you've already upset him some way. Just the fact that I exist upsets him, Harry sighed. Black and your friend, Snape called loudly. Unless you are discussing your potion, I suggest you both shut up. You have my apologies, Professor Snape, Harry answered with barely concealed sarcasm. The man glared at the pair for several moments before he began moving around the class and inspecting the work of the other students. Git, Leo mumbled, causing Harry to snort and the man to turn sharply in their direction. Under the reproachful gaze of the irked professor, the two completed the assigned work in companionable silence, both looking forward to the end of the class when they could escape the oppressive atmosphere. I don't think I've ever met a more unpleasant chap, Leo exclaimed as they exited. Must be the combination of darkness and potions fumes that make him so miserable. Harry nodded. He knows his stuff, though, he countered defensively. Shame he doesn't want to actually teach us anything, a voice interrupted to the right of the duo. Or have a sense of humor, another similar one added from their left. Twins, Leo sighed. "And bloody ginger ones too," he added, as he took in their appearance. "Fred and George Weasley," the two introduced themselves with a bow. "And I think you'll find our hair is a beautiful copper color," George finished. "It makes us rather dashing," Fred quipped. "Quite the lookers, I'd say," George added. Leo shook his head as he looked between them, both amused and overwhelmed by their antics. "You two are enough to give me a headache," he muttered. "I'd best check on Rasputin. Merlin only knows what he's up to in that forest," he announced as they reached the entrance hall. "Who's Rasputin?" Fred asked. Leo gave the questioning twin a devilish smirk. "He's a friend of mine. Maybe I'll introduce you both to him sometime," he offered, his grin turning feral. "Some mischief to look forward to," Fred replied to the retreating boy. "We would never refuse a stroll through the forest," George added challengingly. Harry laughed as he shook his head. "I wouldn't be too keen," he advised. "Rasputin is not the most accommodating beast, he says." George mused aloud as he scratched his chin. "What type of beast is he?" Harry's gaze flitted between the attentive twins as he smiled. "One that I would avoid if you like your limbs attached to your body," he answered cryptically. "See you later, gentlemen," he added as he left two nervous Weasleys in his wake, intent on heading back to the Blacks' rooms to get some much-needed time away from the chaotic activities of the castle. He arrived to find a much more relaxed Sirius than the one that had left them earlier in the day, lounging in an armchair. "Where have you been?" the man questioned. "We went to have a potions class with Snape," Harry answered as he removed his robes, leaving him in a white t-shirt and dark jeans. "And how did old Snivelus treat you?" Harry huffed slightly as he shot his father an annoyed look. "How do you think?" Sirius chuckled unashamedly as he stretched his legs and groaned. "All in 7 years' work," he stated. Noticing that Harry was heading towards the bathroom, he flicked his wand towards the door and quelled the urge to laugh. "You can't blame me for what I did as a kid," he shouted. Harry paused for a moment, his grip tightening around the handle as he simply shook his head. Not wanting to discuss it further, he pushed the door open only to be stopped in his tracks by a yelp of shock. On instinct he drew his wand and leveled it at the thoroughly embarrassed woman who was trying to preserve her modesty, his eyes flashing a dangerous emerald. "Who are you?" he demanded. Nymphadora Tonks covered herself as best she could, mortified that someone had walked in on her making use of the facilities. She met the eyes of the trespasser and froze under the glare. It took a lot to shake the young Aurora, and the young man stood in front of her had done it with only a look. She could only sputter incoherently, torn between anger and indignance. Thrown off by the appearance of the strange woman in the bathroom and receiving no answer to his question, Harry turned away to confront his father, only to find him doubled over, laughing at the predicament of the two. Seeing no humor in the situation, Harry growled as he stalked towards the man. "We had a deal," he seethed. "No women during the day, and you would be discreet." Sirius held up a placating hand, still unable to speak through the level of his mirth. The two were interrupted by the sound of the toilet flushing and were shortly joined by a furious red-haired woman, her face blushing a similar shade. Undeterred by his anger, she approached Harry and poked him in the chest forcefully. "What the hell? Do you make it a habit of walking in on women using the lav?" she ground out. Harry was surprised by her aggression but shook his head irritably. "Me? You might want to try locking the door if you're going to use someone else's bathroom," he returned. Tonks pushed her face upwards towards his angrily. "I did lock the door." Harry narrowed his eyes and turned his attention to a somewhat composed Sirius, though he still wore a triumphant grin. "You did it," he accused. Sirius chuckled. "Only returning the favor," Sirius returned with a mock salute. Harry shook his head, remembering when he had done the same to the man and his Aunt Cassie. The woman's wrath had been something he would never forget, and it had taken Sirius almost a fortnight to be able to sit down comfortably after he had walked in on her. "That doesn't change the fact that you broke the rules," Harry retorted grumpily. "It's not like that," Sirius denied, cringing at the implication. "This is my cousin, Nymphadora. I told you about her years ago." Harry immediately turned to face the woman once more, noticing with a frown that her hair was now a bright pink. I'm sorry, Nymphadora, he offered sincerely. I got the wrong idea and I'm sorry for the embarrassment. My name is Tonks, she corrected. It's okay, but Sirius is going to pay for it, she promised with a sinister grin towards the now wide-eyed man. It was just a harmless joke, he muttered petulantly. Not a funny one, Harry chastised. I could have really hurt her. Or seen more than you did, Tonks added with a wink. Harry blushed slightly as he shook his head. Again, I'm sorry, he offered. Tonks shrugged. No harm done, she sighed. Besides, Sirius will be the one paying for it. He's not the only one who likes a good joke. Harry chuckled. What happened to your eyes? The woman questioned. They were green a minute ago. Harry rubbed the back of his head. They change when I'm angry or using magic, he explained. What about your hair? Tonks gave him a wicked grin and cycled her hair through several colors. I'm a metamorph, she explained proudly. Harry nodded in understanding. Full or partial? Full, she confirmed, shifting her features a few times before turning them back to her chosen form for the day. She noticed that Harry seemed a little uncomfortable with the revelation and she frowned slightly. Must be useful for your job, he offered, gesturing towards her red robes. Yep, she answered with a nod. Useful for lots of things, she added with a wink. Harry shook his head as he gave his father another glare. Anyway, I'll leave you to it. I'm going to train a little, he announced. And the weighing of the wands is tomorrow, he added. Nice to meet you, he offered stiffly before exiting the room. Did I say something wrong? Tonks questioned once he'd left. Sirius sighed. No. Harry is not great with meeting new people and I think your ability has phased him a little. He will come around, he promised. Tonks could only nod in confusion at the thought of the younger Black. His curiosity had stretched only as far to query the level of her talents. After that he had clearly distanced himself from her. She couldn't help but feel a little put out and think that she had done something wrong. Instead of dwelling on it, she decided that she would speak to him later. Sirius had briefly explained what had happened to him as a child, and she did not want her presence to make anything uncomfortable for him or herself whilst she was spending time with her older cousin. Harry awoke the next morning, having spent his evening completing some light training and tending to his wand, something he did regularly. It was his most treasured possession, not only because he once believed that he would never be able to wield one, but because of its origins. He completed a morning run around the castle grounds before showering and waiting for Sirius to rise, something that would not happen at a reasonable time. He occupied his time with a little bit of light revision on the different types of dragon breeds that Leo had identified upon his arrival, marveling at the beast's size and immense power. Unbelievable, he muttered, perplexed that the ministry had included them in the tournament. Creatures of this caliber meant only destruction and were a threat to any they deemed to be a threat or prey. The list of animals they did not was very small after all. He had pondered if the other champions were aware of what they would face, but had thought nothing else of it. As both Leo and Sirius had pointed out, it was an advantage and he himself certainly wasn't going to announce it for the others to hear, though the latter of the two was convinced they would already know somehow. Morning, a sleepy Sirius greeted him before yawning loudly, pulling him from his thoughts. Sleep well? Not bad, Harry replied as the man pulled him into a hug. It was a simple show of affection, but something that Sirius always did when he first saw Harry each day. For Harry it was one of the things he never took for granted. Are you ready for the wand weighing? Harry shrugged. I don't like the idea of having it inspected, but it has to be done, I suppose. Sirius nodded. I imagine it will be Ollivander checking them. He's a good guy, a bit nuts, but damn good with wands, Sirius explained. Then why didn't I get my first one from him? Harry questioned. Because you have to be 11 to purchase one from him, Sirius answered as he ruffled the teen's hair. Harry mumbled under his breath as he fixed his locks, shooting a scathing look at the man. It's not like you will need a new one either, so tough luck, kiddo, Sirius pointed out. And remember, don't let anyone look down on you because of it. It's your wand and all of it is a part of you. I know, Harry sighed. The revelation of Harry being a Parselmoth had been met with a lot of curiosity amongst the Blacks. Harry, having only been 9 when he found out, had no understanding as to why the language was held in the regard it was amongst certain wizards. When Arcturus explained that the last Dark Lord was one, Harry did everything he could to forget he possessed the ability. That was until his Aunt Cassie gave him a long talk about magical intent and having a unique ability that he had the chance to explore. Ever since then, it had been something he had invested a considerable amount of time into. Arcturus had acquired a few books for him to peruse, and his skill with the branch of magic had only increased over the years. He had not looked back since. "Well, we have a little time before we have to be there. How about I show you where the kitchens are and we get some breakfast?" "Sounds good. Leo and Cassie are already doing lessons, so it's just us today," Harry explained as he stood and followed Sirius's lead out of the room. An hour later, after sating their appetites and witnessing the very amusing house elves going about their business, the two left the kitchen and made their way to the 4th floor to the room that had been allotted for the event. The other 3 champions had already arrived with their entourages, along with a reporter, her cameraman, and 2 auras that Harry recognized as Tonks and James Potter. He paid no heed to any of the people within as he found a seat and waited for the proceedings to begin, keen for this to be over as soon as possible. The other champions conversed amongst themselves amiably enough, all ignoring his presence, something he was grateful for. The same could not be said for the reporter. He felt her gaze boring into him and he met her hungry stare with narrowed eyes, his hand twitching towards his wand at the discomfort he felt. He looked up towards his father as his hand came to rest on his shoulders and relaxed as Sirius gave him a slight shake of the head, urging him to remain calm. Instead of cursing the woman, he took a deep breath, just in time for Dumbledore to arrive, a man that could not be much younger than himself in tow, who in turn was followed by both Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch. "Wonderful everybody is here," Bagman exclaimed excitedly. "Dumbledore, if you will." "Thank you, Ludo," Dumbledore acquiesced. "We are here today to carry out the weighing of the wands. This is to ensure that they are functioning correctly and are adequate for the tasks ahead," the man explained. "May I introduce to you Mr. Garrick Ollivander, who will be the expert examining them." Ollivander gave a brief bow and took it upon himself to begin his work. "Mr. Crumb, if you please," he requested of the surly Bulgarian. Harry had of course heard of the man but could not understand why he always appeared to be so miserable. He watched as Kroom slouched towards the wandmaker and handed his over for the required inspection. 10 water inches, hornbeam with dragon heartstring," Oliver said more to himself. "An excellent example of Gregorevich's work," he praised. He gave the wand a gentle wave, producing a fountain of wine, and deemed it satisfactory before handing it back and beckoning for the French champion to step forward. Fleur Delacour approached him, flicking her long silver hair over her shoulder, her nose turned upwards. Harry shook his head at her snootiness, his previous meeting of the girl having not been pleasant. "Oh my," the wandmaker exclaimed as he grasped her wand. "Rosewood, 9½ inches with velar hair," he stated in confusion. "A very volatile core, but if it works for you," he finished with a shrug. "Oui," Fleur responded simply. Ollivander gave the wand a flick and handed the conjured bouquet of flowers to the girl along with her wand. "Mr. Diggory," Ollivander called. Cedric approached the man, giving his wand a cursory rub with a cloth before allowing him to take possession of it. "Now this one I do now," Ollivander mused aloud. 12 inches. "Ash with the tail hair of a rather aggressive male unicorn," he announced thoughtfully. "In excellent condition, Mr. Diggory," he offered with a smile. The man twirled the wand between his fingers, unleashing a barrage of multicolored sparks before deeming it worthy and handing it back to the Hogwarts champion. "And finally, Mr. Black," the wandmaker requested, his eerie eyes landing on Harry. With an internal sigh, he stood and approached the man, still no less comfortable about handing his wand to a stranger. "You might want to put on some dragonhide gloves," he advised. "My wand does not like to be touched by other people." Ollivander's eyebrows rose momentarily before he schooled his features and nodded. Harry did his best to ignore the questioning whispers around him as the man took the wand in his gloved hands. "A very strong bond indeed," Ollivander whispered, the room falling silent as he carried out the inspection of the final wand. 12 inches, Blackwood. His monologue paused as he met the eyes of the teen, his own widening as he nodded excitedly. The cause freely given, he muttered. How did you come across such a creature? Harry shrugged. She was old, he replied. She bonded with me and asked me to kill her so that she could pass on, he explained. Ollivander smiled as he nodded. May I see? Harry undid the top 3 buttons on his shirt and exposed the skin on the left, his chest and shoulder. All 3 bit you? Ollivander questioned in disbelief. Harry nodded as he chuckled. She assured me it would not be fatal, but I was sick for almost 2 weeks, and it hurt like hell. Indeed, Ollivander replied with a laugh of his own. Well, it is a spectacular wand. Did you craft it yourself? With some help, Harry clarified. Ollivander nodded thoughtfully. Fangs, heartstring and venom core, he announced to the surprise of those gathered. Of what exactly? Madame Maxime asked. Harry nodded his consent when the wandmaker sought his permission. He knew that he would be accused of cheating if he attempted to hide its contents. A very old hydra, Ollivander confirmed. Impossible, Maxime declared as the other people in the room began whispering furiously. Such a wand would be an unfair advantage. And your student being a Veela might prove to be to hers, Sirius broke in angrily. It's his wand. It doesn't make him any more powerful than he is naturally. Correct, Mr. Black, Ollivander interjected. A wand is only as powerful as the wizard that wields it. There are very few exceptions to this, but this wand is not one of them, he finished firmly. Madame Maxime was not satisfied, but the other champions were not at all perturbed by Harry's wand. My champion cannot help her ethidage, she defended. And my son cannot help his, Sirius returned. Your champion has her allure and gift with fire, but you don't hear the other 2 complaining. It does not matter, Crumb huffed. We'd have Veela at Durmstrang. It just makes it more fun, Cedric shrugged with an easy smile. We have to use what we are good at. Excellent, Dumbledore declared, putting an end to the disagreement. If you are happy, Garrick, then we can end the ceremony. Ollivander gave a nod as he handed Harry his wand back. Photos, Dumbledore, the reporter reminded him. Yes, of course, the old man complied benignly. What followed was an uncomfortable 30 minutes of the champions being shifted in various positions and poses for the photographer as the reporter fired instructions at the man. Much to Harry's relief, the photographer finally took the last shot, and he headed immediately towards the door, only to be accosted by the reporter who took his forearm in a vice-like grip. He drew his wand and placed the tip under her chin, ready to let loose a curse, and whispered a few words in Parseltongue to calm his stirring familiar. He did not appreciate being grabbed in such a forceful way, and the look he found himself under. Thankfully, for the sake of the reporter, Sirius had witnessed it, and stepped in before the situation could become much less pleasant. You will unhand my son, he commanded furiously. The public has a right to know his story, the woman returned, undeterred by the burning emerald orbs of the teen. I'm sure Harry has much to say. Sirius growled as he drew his own wand, all eyes now firmly on the altercation as Dumbledore began approaching the group. We owe no explanation, Sirius spat. Now let go of my son, or so help me I will kill you where you stand. The woman wilted under the threat, now fully aware of the mistake she had made. Rita, release Mr. Black, Dumbledore advised. Reluctantly she did so and attempted to give the teen a warm smile. Sirius, not satisfied with her actions, seized her by the front of her robes and glared into her eyes malevolently. If a single negative word is printed regarding my son, I will bring the full weight of the House of Black down on you and your employers. Do you understand me? He hissed. Rita nodded fearfully as Sirius released her. Good, Sirius declared. Now, Harry, why don't you go and practice whilst I have a word with the headmaster here, he suggested as he shifted his gaze towards the aged man. Harry shrugged and exited the room, giving the reporter a final scornful stare as he closed the door behind him before heading towards the 3rd floor and the sanctity of his room. He made it to the end of the corridor without interruption, only to be caught up to by an almost running Tonks. Watch her, Harry. Mind if I walk with you? She greeted him breathlessly. You can walk where you like. At least this way I won't walk in on you in the toilet, he deadpanned, the ghost of a smirk gracing his lips as his eyes sparkled impishly. Tonks blushed and shook her head irritably. "Not the ideal way to meet someone," she muttered. "No, not really," Harry agreed, not missing a step as he continued walking. An awkward silence fell between the two, and Tonks took the opportunity to take her first real look at him. The day before had not been her proudest moment, and she had been too embarrassed to focus on him. He was taller than her by quite the margin and carried himself with confidence, his steps purposeful yet very quiet and graceful, the opposite of her own clumsy feet. His jet black was cut shorter than the other members of his family, and he had the beginnings of dark stubble adorning his face. But it was his features that were most striking. He certainly had the look of the blacks to a degree, the high cheekbones and lithe figure. But there was much more to him. He was without doubt handsome, and would only grow more so as he aged a little more. She blushed again as she looked away, having no desire to dwell on such thoughts. "Did I do something to upset you yesterday?" she questioned suddenly. Harry came to a stop and frowned at the woman in confusion. "No," he denied. "Why would you think that? It's just that when you realized I was a metamorph, you just left. I don't want it to be weird when we're around each other." Harry chuckled as he shook his head. "You're talking to a parcel mouth," he reminded her. "I'm not a hypocrite and wouldn't hold a gift against anyone," he finished firmly. He sighed. "It's not what you are, Tonks," he assured her. "It just threw me off." "Too many thoughts of what I can do with my talents?" she questioned with a grin. Harry frowned and shook his head again. "When people find out what I can do with snakes, they decide that I am somehow a performing monkey. I can only imagine how people react to you and what their expectations are," he offered sympathetically. Tonks nodded dumbly. He'd never be able to understand fully what she had experienced, but he had the maturity and intelligence to at least consider more than what could be said of anyone else she had met, other than her parents, of course. "It's a special gift you have," Harry continued, "and as Sirius said to me about my own, it doesn't have to define you in any way. It's only a small part of who you are," he recited dismissively. Tonks gave him a genuine smile which turned into a smirk. "Doesn't mean I shouldn't use it when it helps," she replied with another wink, changing her eye color to match his silvery own. Harry merely shrugged in reply. "You have to do what you want to do," he returned. "I'll see you later, Tonks." Nymphadora Tonks watched him leave with a frown of confusion marring her features. She got the impression that Harry was not as fazed by her as Sirius had said, but he was certainly not comfortable around her either. She sighed deeply as she pondered him. He'd shown understanding towards her to an extent, his own ability garnering just as much as her attention. She thought that it would create a form of kinship between the two, but only served to distance them further based on the conversation they had just shared. It both confused and irritated the young woman to no end at how much he intrigued her and left her feeling worse than before she had spoken to him. She huffed as she contemplated him further, vowing that she would fix the rather strange rift between them, and as she turned to go about her duties, she formulated a plan to do just that. Having bypassed Sir Cadogan by simply changing her appearance to match that of her older cousin, Tonks approached the room that she had seen Harry entering the previous day as she morphed her features back to her own. She had waited until past midnight, not only to ensure that the blacks would be sleeping, but because it was the optimum time for what she intended to do. For that, however, she wanted to invite Harry to help. It was he that had been wronged also. As quietly as possible, she determined that there were no wards placed on his door and turned the handle carefully and entered the room, closing the door behind her with little more than a gentle click of the catch. Allowing her eyes to adjust to the darkness within, she couldn't help but notice how neat and organized the room was. At his age, and even to this day, her own room and now flat was in a constant state of disarray. It wasn't unclean, just a manageable and familiar chaos for her. Her eyes drifted to the bed and the sleeping form, his bare chest rising and falling rhythmically as he slumbered on, currently unaware of her presence. She approached, debating the best way to wake him. She had already witnessed how quick he was with his wand and did not want to provoke his ire. As she drew closer, she noticed 6 darker circles of skin across the left side of his chest, and her eyebrows rose at the deep, purple scars of where the hydra he had bonded with had bitten him. Her curiosity getting the better of her, she tentatively reached towards one of the puncture wounds with her fingertips, only to release a startled yelp as she found her wrist in a tight grip and looking down the shaft of a wand into a pair of very alert emerald eyes that glowed brightly, even in pitch blackness of the room. "Tonks?" Harry questioned hoarsely.
"Watcher, Harry?"
The metamorph replied with a grin. Harry shook his head to clear it. "What are you doing here?" "Well, I was going to see if you wanted to help me get some revenge on SIRIUS for what he did yesterday, but now I'm worried that you're going to kill me," she finished weakly as his gaze continued to burn into her own. "It's 1 a.m, he grumbled. "Can you think of a better time to get him?" she returned. Harry chuckled despite his sleep being disturbed, not to mention the fact that this woman had broken into his room. He released her and rubbed his eyes as he nodded. "What did you have in mind?" he asked with a dangerous smirk. "I don't know," Tonks sighed. "This is about as far as I got when I planned this," she admitted with a pout. Harry snorted as he shook his head. "All right," he huffed, "I have an idea." Tonks grinned at him. "Well, come on then," she urged. With another sigh, Harry lit his wand, pushed his duvet away, and summoned his jeans from the back, the chair at his desk. He slipped them on and stood to fasten them only to feel the eyes of the woman on him. "Like what you see, Tonks?" he questioned, snapping her from her observations of him. "I guess we are even now," she replied, glad that she could hide the blush that was threatening to make its way on her cheeks. She chided herself for her actions, but could certainly appreciate what she had seen. Clearly Harry trained very hard if his physical condition was anything to go by. He was not overly muscular, but he had an athletic build. She shook those thoughts away, refusing to fawn over someone's appearance like a schoolgirl. "Actually, you've seen more of me now," Harry quipped, forcing her to work harder to keep from blushing. "I didn't see anything other than those lovely white knickers you wore," he added casually. This time the blush did form, and she fired a stinging hex towards him for his comment, only to watch him flick it deftly away with his wand and a winning smile. "I didn't have time to wash any others," she defended weakly. Harry chuckled. "I'm not one to judge, Nymphadora," he continued, jesting, enjoying the fact that he had the upper hand. "The little butterflies were adorable," Tonks growled. "She never allowed anyone to get the better of her, but she had nothing to come back with." "I'll get you back later," she vowed, "but SIRIUS is first." Harry only laughed in response as he summoned a t-shirt and retrieved a box from under his bed. He opened it and checked the contents before gesturing for her to follow him. He led her into the living area and gestured for her to be quiet before casting a silencing charm on 2 of the 3 bedroom doors, and the bathroom for good measure. He tiptoed towards the remaining door and entered, gesturing for her to wait whilst he checked that his father was indeed sleeping. "Was that?" Sirius Black mumbled sleepily as he sat up suddenly, having been woken by the strong feeling that something was amiss. The room was dark and silent, so the man steadied his breathing as he swept his dark locks away from his face, listening intently for any sound. After a moment of awareness, he shrugged and shook his head, grumbling about his own paranoia as he slid back beneath his duvet to resume sleeping, only to release a girlish scream as an obnoxiously loud sound of a horn blowing disturbed him further. Breathless and infuriated, he growled, mentally preparing to discipline his son and his friend for their actions. It had been a while since the 2 boys had targeted him, but he should have expected. It was he that had begun the pranks amongst them. "Little bastards," he muttered as he stood, only for his feet to slip away from under him. He hit the ground with a mighty crash and groaned from the impact, the wind having been knocked out of him. His hope that the humiliation would end with this lasted but a few seconds, as a larger-than-necessary amount of ice-cold water splashed over his head, leaving him a sodden mess. "That's it," he roared, pulling himself to his feet. "You're both in for it." He stalked towards the door and paused as he heard the laughter from the other side, one easily identifiable, but a sound he did not hear often enough. It was an almost alien sound that quelled his anger immediately, the giggling of his son never failing to do so. The accompanying female sounds did surprise him, but he deduced immediately that it could only be courtesy of his younger cousin. The thought of the two conspiring against him together made him smile, despite being the one on the receiving end of their endeavor. He opened the door a few inches and listened to giggling, almost basking in a display that Harry would demonstrate more often. He had never been a typical child, nor teenager, but it was these moments of utter joy that Sirius Black lived for. "I'll get you both for this," he warned half-heartedly. And he would. He would concede nothing to the surprising new allies. It was not in his nature. With a shake of his head and a few waves of his wand, he cleaned up the mess and dried himself off, hoping that having Nymphadora around may just help Harry loosen up somewhat. "Merlin knows he needs it," he sighed sadly as he rested his head on his pillow and casted a few wards on his door, just in case. With Sirius's declaration of revenge ringing in their ears, Harry and Tonks settled on the couch in the living area, still laughing at the results of their deed. It had gone better than either could have hoped, although they had almost been caught by Nymphadora tripping on the corner of the rug. Harry had managed to catch her, and they both had to stifle their giggles as the man had stirred from his sleep. "Do you think he will get us back?" Tonks questioned. "He will," Harry replied with a grin. "It will be back and forth for a while until Aunt Cassie gets annoyed and puts an end to it." "Well, I wouldn't have thought you had it in you, Harry." Harry shook his head in amusement. "I was raised by Sirius Black. You have to have it in you to survive," he explained. "He is a bit of a legend around here, him, Potter, Lupin and Pettigrew," Tonks sighed. She noticed Harry's eyes flash furiously at the mention of the three other men. "Sorry," she offered quickly. "Don't be," he insisted. "I dealt with my demons long ago, but if I ever get my hands on the rat, I will gladly rip him limb from limb." Tonks could not help but believe him. Her career centered around dangerous people, and Harry certainly had such a side to him from what she had seen thus far. "Anyway," he spoke once more, quickly moving away from the awkward subject, "why did you have to wake me up to help?" "Couldn't do it without me," he jested. Tonks huffed as she sat up arrogantly. "Of course I could. I was just trying to be nice and let you in on the fun. And to stop you falling on your ass," Harry returned with a smirk. "Downside to this," she explained as she morphed her torso and features, acutely aware of the grimace he wore. "It does make you uncomfortable," she accused. Harry shook his head and held up his hands. "It's not you or what you can do that makes me uncomfortable," he denied firmly. "It's just a little unnerving for me." "Why?" she asked with a frown. His silvery gaze met her own and she shuddered under it, feeling as though he was staring straight into her soul. Seemingly satisfied, he gave her a sad smile. "When my parents gave me up, Dumbledore sent me to Lily's Muggle sister and her husband," he began, his countenance much more timid than she could have expected from him. "In public there were these friendly, happy people who doted on their son and nephew with warm smiles and such, showering me with praise and even buying me presents, that sort of stuff." He took a deep breath before continuing. "Behind closed doors they were different. They locked me in a cupboard, didn't bother feeding me, and used me as a punch bag when they felt like it. And I have no idea why I'm telling you this," he finished with a pained look in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Harry," she said sincerely as she took his hands, fighting her own emotions back. "I didn't know." Harry shook his head and gave her a weak smile. "It's fine. It's just that I learned from a young age that what you see with people isn't always who they really are. People can hide behind masks, and it unsettles me a little that you have the ability to do it so easily." Tonks snorted slightly. "That's exactly what it is perfect for," she muttered. "What if I choose just form and stick to it when I'm around you?" Harry frowned. "No, you shouldn't have to do that. This is a part of who you are, something that I must get used to. You shouldn't have to change because of me and my stupid insecurities." "They're not stupid," she insisted. Stubbornly, Harry shrugged. "Either way, you're not changing the way you are to spend time here. Your family. I will have to deal with it." "Then I guess I will just have to spend more time here until you do," she replied with a smirk. "Someone will have to watch your back for when Sirius plans his revenge." Harry chuckled. "You can spend as much time here as you like, especially if you're willing to be a human shield," he quipped. "I may be clumsy at times. All the time, I bet." But she continued with a scowl, I am quite handy with my wand. Do you know how to take down a dragon? Tonks frowned. A dragon? Never mind, Harry chuckled as he waved her off. I had best get to bed, unless you need to disturb my sleep for anything else. Tonks tapped her chin with her finger and shook her head. Not tonight, she sighed. Maybe some other time, she added with a wink as she rose and exited the room. Harry simply shook his head at the woman. He had quickly understood that Tonks was a flirty kind of person, and it was just one of those other things about her he would have to learn to handle. For Charlie Potter, the days since his brother had arrived at the castle had been both trying and had left him reeling under a sense of nervous tension. Harry was seldom seen around the school itself, something he couldn't decide on whether that was a good or bad thing. He had pondered the boy for many years, always wondering where he was and what he was doing with his life, wishing he had the opportunity to meet him, and yet he was but a few floors below him and no closer to spending time with the brother that had been taken from him all so many years ago. Admittedly, he had not sought out the older boy from fear that he would not be welcome, but as more time passed, the more it felt that his desire would remain unfulfilled. Both Ron and Hermione had encouraged him to try at least, but Charlie couldn't. Harry had a family, had grown without him, and the fear of being rejected proved to be too much. The situation with his parents had remained the same. He stubbornly refused to speak to them, after learning what they had done to the boy. He was not known for his temper, was considered to be rather meek compared to the man that had sired him. However, the actions of his parents had angered him, and he knew he was in no position to maintain a semblance of calm around them as things were. Come on, Charlie, Ron encouraged. Let's go get some breakfast. Charlie shook the thoughts of his family from his head and followed his two friends through the portrait. Himself and the youngest Weasley had been waiting for the girls so that they could head to the Great Hall together. Charlie despised being coddled, but his parents had always insisted he not venture out alone whilst at school, something he grudgingly accepted. The Slytherins would often target him when the opportunity arose, and he had learned that to his own detriment in his second year. After a week in the hospital wing recovering from broken bones and the effects of several hexes, being shadowed always was a necessity. We have potions first, Hermione reminded the pair, eliciting a groan from Ron. Charlie enjoyed the subtle art of brewing, a class that required minimal usage of his wand and something he excelled doing. It was obvious to any that Snape disliked him with a passion, and the feeling was mutual. Charlie, however, had gained the man's respect after he had proven that he was not in fact the dunderhead. The potions professor had initially believed. For the most part he now ignored him, a much preferable treatment than what most of his peers were subjected to by the greasy man. It's not that bad, Ron, Charlie comforted, laughing at the look of horror that adorned his friend's face. Not that bad. Every lesson with him is a nightmare. I'll help you, Charlie assured him as they reached the Great Hall and took their seats at the Gryffindor table. Thanks, mate, Ron replied over a mouthful of toast, having wasted no time in starting to get his fill. Charlie simply shook his head at his friend and grinned at the look of disgust. Hermione gave the boy as he tucked into his own food. 2 hours, a less than stellar lesson, and a very right Ron Weasley later, the trio exited the dungeons, the boy cursing under his breath, earning himself a rather stern glare from the bushy-haired female. Bloody, slimy git, he grumbled, finishing his rant. Well, Ronald, if you followed the instructions correctly, then you wouldn't have melted your cauldron, Hermione huffed. How was I supposed to know the porcupine quills had to be added before the myrtlip, he questioned irritably. Because it said so in the instructions? Charlie answered with a grin. Ron flushed and mumbled something incoherent, only to stumble as he walked into something solid as the group turned the corner into the entrance hall. The trio froze as they were greeted by the sight of the fourth champion and his friend, both looking amused at the dumb expressions they wore. It's sorry, Ron managed to stutter. The boy he had bumped into shook his head and gave him a grin. Think nothing of it, little Red, he said dismissively. You're the one who cursed Malfoy, Ron stated matter-of-factly, his eyes shining in awe. The wanker had it coming, the older boy mumbled. Language, Hermione chided, flushing embarrassedly as his green eyes switched to her, his mouth opening in shock. Is she always like this? he questioned Ron, who shook his head in exasperation. You have no idea, mate? The boy laughed as Hermione reddened further, the three of them unaware of the staring match ensuing between the other two males. What's wrong, Harry? Leo questioned, switching his glance between the two. The younger boy looked as though he had been petrified. His eyes were wide and his mouth gaping. Harry simply smiled as he answered his friend. This is my little brother, he explained as he gestured to the nervous boy. Leo's eyebrows rose at the revelation, but smiled nonetheless. Harry had explained about his younger sibling and that he had no idea how to handle the situation. Leo had pointed out that the boy was not to blame for anything that had happened, and that he should seek him out. Harry had remained indecisive. He held nothing against Charlie, but was at a loss on what he should do. Nice to meet you, Leo offered, extending his hand to the still unmoving Charlie. This snapped him out of his stupor as he accepted the boy's proffered limb and shook it mechanically. You too, he whispered, his eyes remaining firmly on his brother. Leo shook his head at the two in understanding as he turned to the redhead and the girl once more. How about we give these two a little privacy and I can teach you both something fun, he suggested. Noting the matching looks of concern each wore, he placated them further. Harry will look after him. Sensing their reluctance, Charlie gave his friends a nod, eliciting a grateful smile from his brother's friend, who began leading Ron and Hermione away. You wouldn't happen to be related to those ginger twins, would you? He questioned Ron. The boy groaned but nodded his head. Well, my friend, I've got just the spell for you to keep them in line, Leo replied as he put his arm around Ron's shoulder, the trio disappearing as they exited the castle. The last thing Charlie heard was Hermione chastising the older boy, who only laughed in response, unfazed by her reprimanding. The silence between the two stretched on for several moments after Ron, Leo, and Hermione had left, neither of the siblings knowing where to begin. Upon meeting the stare of his younger brother, Harry had been pulled into a memory of staring into those hazel eyes as he fed the boy from a bottle, helped by Lily, who had settled the small bundle into his lap. Unwittingly, it caused a smile to form on his lips just as Charlie lost his composure. I'm so sorry, he choked. Harry shook his head gently as he held up a hand. You have nothing to be sorry for, he said firmly. Noticing the crowd that started to form around them witnessing their reunion, he frowned and beckoned for the boy to follow him. Charlie did so, his head hanging as he refused to meet the stare of his older brother. Harry led him to the third floor and into an empty classroom that he found. Satisfied that the room was not used much, if the layer of dust on the desks was anything to go by, he erected a privacy ward and pulled out a chair for the younger boy. Let's not focus on what happened before, he suggested, much to the surprise of Charlie. We could spend days talking about it, but it won't change anything. What happened happened, and there's nothing we can say or do that will change that, he finished with a shrug. Charlie swallowed deeply as he nodded his agreement. I'm still angry at them, he whispered. All of them. Harry chuckled slightly. As am I, he sighed, but they are still your parents. Believe me, I know what it is like to lose them. They made a lot of mistakes, but they did what they thought was right by you. But not you, Charlie returned heatedly. Harry gave him a sad smile. And it's me that has to deal with that, he pointed out. Trust me, Charlie, you don't want to have regrets where your parents are concerned. Charlie shook his head. I don't think I can forgive them for it, he muttered. I'm not saying you have to, Harry said, but you can move past it. I won't ever forgive what they did to me, and I will never see them as my parents, but they are still yours. They raised you, clothed you, and fed you. I imagine they have both been there for you through everything. Charlie nodded begrudgingly. Then don't lose that because of what happened to me. I'll try, Charlie conceded unhappily. Good, Harry praised with a smile. I was always told you were a squib, Charlie spoke sadly after a moment of peaceful silence between the two. I was as good as, Harry sighed. That all changed when I was 7. A complete accident, he explained. What happened? Charlie asked eagerly. Nothing good, Harry replied. I would have died if it weren't for Aunt Cassie, my father and grandfather. Oh, Charlie returned dejectedly. Harry frowned. Seeing his brother's expression, Charlie shrugged. I thought you might know something to help me, he added. I've had problems with my magic since that night. It's really weak, and I have to wear this thing to help, he explained, as he lifted his shirt, revealing his belt. What is that? It helps me absorb ambient magic around the castle. It boosts my reserves so I can do magic without exhausting myself too much, he answered bitterly. Sometimes when it's low, Dad or Dumbledore have to put some into it too. Harry inspected the impressive construct. Creating something such as this was no mean feat. He could read very few of the runes, but could admit that workmanship of the device was very innovative. He frowned at the gently flickering lights. It's low now, he pointed out. Well, I'm not speaking to Dad or Dumbledore at the moment, Charlie reminded him sheepishly. Harry could see how tired the boy appeared to be. The bags under his eyes were dark and his skin quite pale. Idiot, Harry muttered as he drew his wand. How do they put their magic in? That rune there, Charlie answered, eyeing the wand warily as he pointed to the rune in question. No, you don't have to, he sputtered as Harry placed the tip of his wand on it. As his older brother pushed, he felt his magic wash over him all the way to the tips of his toes, warming and perking him up significantly. It felt like his father's in a way, but completely different in others. Much more comfortable also. It was stronger too, and his body positively hummed as it was invigorated by the almost suffocating nature of what was being forced through him. Thank you, he offered gratefully when Harry withdrew his wand. Any time, Harry responded with a smile, happy that the younger boy was looking much better already. If you need it, you just have to ask. I've got enough, he explained with a shrug. Charlie nodded and returned the smile warmly. How often do you have to do it? Harry asked. Every few days or so, depending on how much magic I use, Charlie sighed unhappily. Well, I doubt that I can help much in the long term, but I can help with that when you need. He frowned thoughtfully for a moment. I can help show you some spells that don't require too much power, if you like. Charlie nodded eagerly, eliciting a chuckle from his brother. Leave it with me and I'll come up with something, he promised. How about we do something fun? I don't think us sitting here moping about the past or our troubles is going to do either of us any good. Like what? How about some flying? I doubt you could have escaped James's love of that your whole life. Charlie's eyes lit up in excitement. He adored flying. It was one of the things he could do that did not drain his magic. It was his moments on a broom that gave him the most freedom. His mum was awful on one, and the day he saw Dumbledore flying would be the day the man shaved his beard. All right, I just need to get my broom, he declared as he almost sprinted from the room, leaving behind an amused yet content Harry who watched him leave with a mix of relief and sympathy. Where did you learn that spell? Hermione questioned suspiciously. At school, of course, Leo replied, as though it were obvious. What kind of school did you go to? She followed up with a frown. Yeah, they don't teach us that kind of stuff here, mate, Ron broke in. Leo smiled as he shook his head at them. The girl was rather invasive and the boy perhaps a little blunt, but he liked them. He could see that they were protective of Harry's brother and both inquisitive in their own ways. I went to 2 different schools, one in Russia and one in Japan. After I blew up my orphanage through accidental magic, it was decided that I would do well at a military academy. Plus, I couldn't afford a school like this and I refused to take the money from the blacks. They'd done enough for me, he explained. Orphanage? Hermione asked sadly. Leo shrugged. I was pulled from a building in Ireland during the last war as a baby. I didn't know who my parents were until recently. There were lots of kids like me, just not many that destroyed half of their house. He finished with a snort. You must be powerful then, Ron interjected. Leo shook his head. Not really, he denied. I'm no slouch and I'm talented in battle magic and transfiguration, but Harry is the one to talk to about power. You put a wand in his hand and I doubt you'll find many that can do what he can. How did you actually meet him then? Ron asked. Leo chuckled. It wasn't long after the orphanage incident. They sent me to a specialist to see if he could help with my magical control. He was a nice fella but couldn't help me as much as I needed. One day, Harry turns up with Sirius and Cassie for the same reason, and we've been friends since. Cassie took pity on me and spent 2 years teaching me occlumency to help with my control, and we've just spent every holiday together and some of each school year. But aren't they evil? Ron questioned in a whisper. Not at all. I owe them everything I have. Cassie didn't have to help me, but she did for whatever reason. Leo shrugged. Don't get me wrong, you don't want to upset any of them, especially old Arcturus, but they've been good to me. Cassie is the closest thing I had to a parent, in her own strange way. I'm sorry about your parents. I know what it's like to lose someone, Ron replied. I never knew them, Leo returned evenly. Most of us lost people during the war. I guess that's one of the reasons why I went to military schools. If I can stop someone having to be in an orphanage because of war, then I will. My uncles died during the war, but we lost my sister in my second year, Ron explained. Oh, sorry, Little Red. I didn't know that, Leo offered sincerely. What happened? "'S-okay," Ron mumbled. We don't really know. Dumbledore told us she had been possessed and died because of it. Leo sighed as he shook his head. I won't pretend I know how that feels. Harry is the closest thing I have to a brother, and I can only guess how much it would hurt if I lost him. Ron nodded. It is getting better, but Mum, Dad, and the rest of us find it hard. She was the only girl. And I bet she had you all wrapped around her little finger. Leo chuckled, causing a smile to form on the younger boy's face. Dad, Bill and Charlie, she did, he agreed. Fred and George were a little scared of her when she lost her temper, and she annoyed me most of the time. I still miss her, though. Leo nodded sympathetically. And what would she say to you if she was stood here right now? Ron frowned. She'd probably tell me I was a stupid git and to cheer up, he sighed. Leo laughed heartily. You loved her and she annoyed you, but I'd bet my life that she loved you just as much. You were her big brother. You're supposed to annoy each other. It's not easy, but try and remember the good times you did have. You won't ever get over it, but you won't forget her either, he advised, placing a comforting hand on Ron's shoulder. The redhead nodded. Hermione looked between the pair with a watery smile. Ron had struggled a lot with Ginny's death and had refused to speak to anyone about it. The rest of the family had been stuck in their own grief, understandably, and Ron had been somewhat ignored. Fred and George had each other. Bill and Charlie were away, and Percy was a useless prat at best. What about you? Ron questioned. What do you think your parents would say? Hermione fought the urge to facepalm, but Leo adopted a thoughtful look, unbothered by the question. I'd like to think that my father would tell me he was proud of me, and that my mum would kick my ass for all the trouble I caused, he responded with a grin. That's probably what she'd do. Ron's face lit up with a grin of his own before he laughed. Now, enough of the depressing stuff. Cast the spell, Leo instructed. Ron concentrated and waved his wand as he muttered the incantation. Leo felt himself pulled towards the girl, and their forearms locked together as both their wands flew towards the elated redhead. Not bad at all, Leo praised. I couldn't pick a better prison buddy if I tried, he added with a wink to a blushing Hermione. Your brothers won't be able to reverse it unless they know the counter-curse or can use your wand. Ron smirked happily, already planning on when he would get some revenge on the twins for the years of torture they had put him through. Let's see if you can do it too, Leo suggested to Hermione. It's a useful spell to know. The trio worked together on the spell and a few others for a while until an irritated Cassiopeia found them and put an end to the activity. Mistress, Leo greeted her with a bow. None of that, Cassie said dismissively. Lucius Malfoy is in Dumbledore's office and is demanding your presence. Leo's eyes narrowed, his genial demeanor slipping as he leered in response. Sorry guys, looks like I have someone else's balls to give a little pinch to, he quipped. Lead the way, my lady. Cassie shook her head but couldn't hide her smile. The fact that the boy was not afraid of Malfoy would serve him well, and she doubted that Lucius knew exactly what was coming for him. Still, he was still her apprentice, and it was her responsibility to ensure that he did not provoke the man too much, though she could not see how that was avoidable. Malfoy was a scumbag, and just the mere sight of him was enough to provoke anyone. I'd best send for Arcturus too, she sighed. Ron and Hermione looked on worriedly. Draco was a nuisance around the school, spouting off his rubbish about his father all the time, but Lucius Malfoy was known to be a dangerous and savvy man. Do you think he'll be okay? Hermione questioned. Ron shrugged. I don't know. but it would be cool to see what happens. Hermione shook her head. Trust Ron to be so dense about the situation, she grumbled internally. Lucius Malfoy was livid. The letter he had received from his son had informed him of the attack upon his person by another visiting student, and Lucius could not allow such a thing to pass without repercussion for the individual. He was a Malfoy, and attack on his son was an attack on him, and that was unacceptable. He had seethed for the past few days, pondering on what he should do. He knew that his son could be overly dramatic at times, so he had taken it upon himself to speak to Draco's housemates, and they had all said the same thing. The boy had cast a spell that could have ended his line if it weren't for the intervention of the professor. Having heard enough, he had made his way to Dumbledore's office and demanded the culprit be brought to him. The old man had attempted platitudes, but Lucius had insisted. He wanted the boy punished, and he would gladly do it himself if necessary. The headmaster had summoned an elf and given it some whispered instructions. "May I offer you some tea, Lord Malfoy?" the man offered cordially. Lucius fought back his sneer as he shook his head, remaining seated until the door began to open, admitting a well-built young man. "Is this him?" Lucius ground out. Dumbledore sighed and nodded. The Malfoy patriarch stalked towards the boy and halted in his steps as a familiar woman entered behind him, a woman he had not seen since his wedding day. This was an unexpected and very unwelcome development. "I understand that you have a grievance to air with my apprentice," Lucius Cassiopeia stated. Lucius swallowed nervously but steeled his resolve. "This boy attacked my heir," he spat. "I demand that he be punished." Cassiopeia raised a delicate eyebrow in response. "You demand nothing of the blacks," she corrected angrily. "That boy is not a black," Lucius countered evenly. "True," Cassie conceded. "Did you harm the Malfoy heir, Leo?" The boy had the temerity to grin. I cursed the cowardly little shite," he confirmed with a shrug. Cassie sighed. "And why did you do it?" "It doesn't matter why," Lucius hissed. The boy lost his composure, his nostrils flaring as he clenched his fist. "You should be thanking me for what I did, Malfoy," he growled. "For attacking my son?" Lucius bit back. "I think not." The boy sneered at him before relaxing considerably, seemingly unworried about his actions. "Do you even know what the moron did? He was having a disagreement with the errant Potter boy and you attacked him," Lucius spat. Leo barked out a short laugh as his grin returned. "No," he denied as he stepped closer to the man. "Your idiot offspring declared himself the heir black. Some would construe that as line theft. Not only that, he then attempted to curse the rightful heir from behind. Had I not intervened when I did, you would have needed a mop to clean up what would have been left of your son, because I can assure you Harry would have given him much more than the warning he got from me. So yes, Malfoy, you should be thanking me for saving your spawn's life." He finished the two now almost nose to nose. Lucius swallowed deeply. Had it not been for Cassiopeia being present, he would have dismissed the boy's claim as falsehood. He cursed the foolishness of his son. The boy knew the power the blacks wielded, and he had not only provoked their ire but may well have cost his own family dearly. His own marriage to Narcissa would only protect him so much after all. He stepped back, uncomfortable with the closeness of the boy who still was unfazed by him, and began desperately thinking of a way to mitigate what his son had done, only for such thoughts to leave his mind as a loud knock echoed throughout the office. "Come in," Dumbledore called, his own twinkling eyes appearing to be amused by the situation. Lucius audibly swallowed as Arcturus Black entered. The man had always been intimidating, and even in his advanced years that effect had not dwindled. "I understand that there is an issue between our houses that must be resolved," he stated as he took a seat, his grey eyes boring into Lucius's blue ones. "What problem could cause you to dare approach my family in such a way, Lucius?" he questioned dangerously. "I believe it has been solved, Arcturus." Cassiopeia broke in, and I believe Lucius was just about to offer a significant monetary reward to Leo for saving his son's life. "I'd say 100,000 galleons would suffice, don't you agree, Lucius?" she asked with a predatory grin. Lucius was furious, but knew that he had been beaten, Such a sum of money was trivial to him, and if it put an end to the matter, then it could only be a positive thing for him. The boy, however, he would get what he deserved one way or the other. Accidents could be arranged at a later date, of course. He gave a stiff nod of compliance. "Wow, that is very generous of you, Mr. Malfoy," Leo replied mockingly. "Maybe I could save it again someday, or even your own." "I wonder how much you value your own life?" he questioned, the threat in his voice poorly concealed. Lucius's lip curled in distaste. The boy would have to be dealt with if he believed he could threaten him in any way. His hand twitched towards wand only to find himself staring down the shaft of one that had been pointed in his face. "Do it," the boy almost pleaded, all signs of humor now absent. "There's no mask or a master to hide behind for you anymore, Malfoy. Let's see if you've got the balls to actually draw your wand on someone that will fight back." Lucius was taken aback by the response, and a little unnerved himself by the feral look in his eyes. "Scared?" the boy dared goad him. "Don't worry, they won't intervene." "That is enough," Dumbledore interjected angrily. "The issue has been resolved. There is no need to provoke it further." Leo gave Lucius a final glare as he sheathed his wand and left the office. "You will pay the money directly into the black accounts, Lucius," Arcturus instructed, "and do have a word with your son. It seems that he needs educating on handling interactions with his betters." Lucius gritted his teeth as he nodded. "Oh, and Lucius," Arcturus spoke again, "if you decide to take issue with my family again, I will personally take pleasure in ending the Malfoy line. Do you understand?" Lucius nodded again, not at all happy with the results of his venture here. Without bidding farewell, he swiftly exited the office, avoiding the smug grin of Cassiopeia and the glare from Arcturus. "He is quite the young man," Dumbledore spoke after a moment. "Standing up to Lucius as he did is rather impressive." "He's hot-headed," Arcturus corrected irritably. "But a good kid." Cassiopeia nodded her agreement. "A credit to me," she added with a warm smile. Dumbledore nodded. He had received his educational transcript and was admittedly satisfied with the results. His schooling had been somewhat different than standard, but he had indeed proven himself. Unsurprising if one were to be accepted by Cassiopeia Black as an apprentice. Having spent most of the afternoon with Harry flying and eating dinner with Ron and Hermione, who had regaled him with the tale of their own afternoon, Charlie arrived at the door to his mother's quarters and knocked gently, still unsure on what he wanted to say to her. The door opened to reveal his father in his aurora robes, wearing a look of surprise. "You know you don't have to knock, son," he chided lightly. Charlie shrugged as he entered the room and took a seat on one of the sofas. "Who is it, James?" the voice of Lily called from the bedroom. "It's Charlie," James confirmed a little nervously. Only a moment later Lily entered the room, her emerald orbs settling on her fidgety son. "Charlie," she breathed, as she approached and pulled him into a tight hug. The teen returned it with only a little hesitation and gave his mother a half-smile as she pulled away. "Does this mean you are talking to us again?" Lily asked, worriedly. Charlie sighed deeply as he dragged a hand through his hair. "Harry said I should." "Harry?" James questioned. "You spoke to him?" The smile that adorned Charlie's face this time was genuine as he nodded. "We went flying, and he even put magic into my belt," he explained happily, lifting his shirt to show them. "He said he's going to teach me some magic that I can use without tiring myself out too," he added excitedly. "Oh, I'm so pleased for you," Lily replied, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm still angry with you," Charlie bit back, "but Harry said that we should move past it. He said that he finished with a shrug. Both James and Lily visibly deflated. "How is he?" James asked tentatively. "He's really nice," Charlie answered, a smile forming on his face once more. "He told me that he remembered feeding me when I was a baby and that I cried a lot." James chuckled. "Milk everywhere," he sighed. "I'd give anything to have that back." "I don't think he'll forgive you," Charlie responded sadly. "I can't say I blame him." "No, we don't either," Lily whispered. "It doesn't mean we will give up," James declared. "He may not see us as his parents, but we are still family. There's not many of us Potters left as it is." Charlie nodded. I will try to help, but I won't do anything that will make him turn away from me. I know you're both sorry, but what you did was unforgivable. I wouldn't be able to if I was him." Lily nodded her understanding. "We will all try," she assured her youngest son. "If there's any chance of anything, then we will take it." Harry could not help but laugh at the scene he walked in on. His father was crouched behind the sofa, pleading with an irate Tonks, who was firing spell after spell in his direction. "Say it," she demanded. Tonks. Sirius yelped as a stinging hex hit him on the rear. "Bloody hell, Harry, help me." Harry shook his head in amusement. "You got yourself in this mess," he stated with a shrug. "I'm your father," Sirius tried weakly. "And I'm sure Nymphadora won't kill you," Harry returned with a grin. "How come he can say it?" Sirius shouted, offended that his son was getting away with the same offense unscathed. "Because of this," Tonks ground out as she fired a spell towards Harry, only for it to be deflected back to her quicker than she could block it. "Now, for every time he says it, I will curse you, Sirius," she declared as she hit him with another hex to turn his pink. "For the love of Merlin, Harry, just say it properly," he begged. Harry sighed as he approached the Aurora and took her wrist in his grip and lowered her wand. "I think he's had enough, Tonks," he conceded. The woman narrowed her eyes at him and stuck her nose in the air as he nodded. "That's better," she huffed, causing Harry to grin as she took a seat. "You're a bloody menace, woman," Sirius growled as he rubbed his posterior. "What's the big deal about using your name?" Tonks simply pointed her wand at him, and the man scarpered into his room and slammed the door behind him. "He does have a point," Harry broke in. "Your name isn't horrible." "You better watch it, Harry," Tonks threatened as she waved her wand under his nose, causing him to raise an eyebrow at her. She sighed, knowing he was not at all intimidated by her, and put it back up her sleeve. "It's not so difficult to work out. Just imagine the kind of jokes that can be made from it," she urged bitterly. Harry deadpanned after a moment of thought. "Sorry," Tonks waved him off. "Only my parents can get away with using my name." "And me," Harry quipped as he nudged her with his shoulder. Tonks glared at him but couldn't prevent the smile that formed. "One of these days I'll figure out a way of getting you," she vowed. "And until then I will get away with it for free," Harry replied, as he stretched casually. Tonks sighed and shook her head. "If it really bothers you, I won't call you it," he promised. "Thank you," she huffed, sincerely relieved that he would respect her wishes. "How was your day?" he questioned. "It was fine until I got here," Tonks grumbled. "Is my company that bad?" Harry returned in mock horror. "It's not so bad," she answered with a grin. "Better than his," she added as she jabbed her thumb in the direction of the door that Sirius disappeared through. "Well, I guess you'll only be coming here to see me from now on," Harry stated with a wink. Tonks nodded. "Maybe," she replied airily. "Maybe I won't bother anymore," she countered. Harry narrowed his eyes at her, eliciting an uncharacteristic giggle. "Are you ready for the tournament?" Harry huffed lightly. "I just want it to be over with," he sighed. "If they told me I could leave, I'd be gone tonight." Tonks frowned slightly before smirking. "Then you wouldn't get to see me anymore," she pointed out as she ruffled his hair. "There is that," he conceded sincerely. "I'd miss you a little, I suppose." "You'd better miss me more than that," Tonks warned. The two had spent quite a lot of time together over the past week, and had become quite friendly. For Harry, she was a breath of fresh air and gave him respite from the seriousness of why he was here. She was fun to be around. Leo was busy most of the time with Aunt Cassie, and Tonks was just Tonks. There was no baggage to being around her, and he was slowly getting used to her ever-changing appearance. "Yeah, I guess I would miss you more than a little," he sighed. Tonks simply grinned triumphantly. She was becoming fond of the boy, much to her surprise. He was much more serious than she was, but he had a mischievous side to him too that always managed to catch her off guard. The thing that mattered to her above all else was that he tried to deal with his discomfort around her and was always respectful. Not once had he asked her to demonstrate her talents and never commented on any changes she made. She felt as though she could be herself around him, and had even transformed herself to appear as ludicrous as possible to see how far she could push before he commented. He never did. Occasionally he would give her an odd glance and then shake it off. Even when she had spent time with him sporting a bald head, he remained unfazed and commented on how bold she was for her choice of the day. She had laughed at the joke and the two had spent time together as normal, despite the lingering trepidation she felt that he was simply shrugging off even her most daring, unattractive and ridiculous forms. Still, not once had he commented nor requested anything from her, and for that alone he had her admiration and she could not help but respect him. Anyone else would have made demands, asked what her limits were, and even attempt to talk her into transforming into something else entirely, usually desirable to them, but not Harry. Harry had proven himself to be one of a kind, and that made her comfortable around him, something that Nymphadora Tonks had only felt around her parents. He must be completely disinterested in women or just disinterested in such things, she mused internally. It mattered not to her. Harry was a good guy and she simply enjoyed being around someone she could be herself with, without the fear that her abilities would be commented on or exploited. "Are you ready for today?" Sirius questioned Harry. The inquiry itself was innocent and asked casually, but there was no denying the tension that had settled over the black entourage. "As ready as I can be," Harry answered darkly. He was not one to let his nerves get the better of him, and was well versed in concealing what he felt. Truth be told, he was terrified. Only a fool would not be when the immediate future entailed facing a behemoth. But he refused to show it. He forced the fear as far down as he could, and steeled himself using his occlumency to its full potential. Much to his relief, the reporter had taken his father's words to heart and had barely even acknowledged him during the article printed in the paper following the wand weighing, and even the masses within the school had soon stopped the infernal whispering that followed him whenever he left the Black Quarters. He had made it abundantly clear from the start that he had no wish to mix with them and that he would be leaving the moment the tournament was concluded. He would miss his brother and even Tonks, the latter having wheedled that particular admission from him. Other than that, he could see no reason why he would remain. He would continue to spend time with both whilst he was here, but he was already looking forward to the day he could return home, never to grace Britain with his presence again. Today was the first step towards that. "Come on, kiddo, it's 10:30, Sirius announced. "Time to go." Harry stood and adjusted his dragonhide trousers before slipping a matching pair of boots on. Arcturus had retrieved them from the black vault along with a long-sleeved top and mask to complete the set. It would not prevent him from being immolated, but it was still very good protection. Harry led the group of Sirius, Aunt Cassie, Arcturus and Leo from the room and through the castle, his outfit and presence causing quite the stir amongst the students assembled in the entrance hall. Ignoring the pointing and whispers, he exited into the grounds and began mentally preparing himself as he made his way to the champion's tent. "Remember what I said, Harry," Arcturus interrupted his thoughts as they arrived. "You do whatever necessary to survive this. Do not worry about any potential fallout. Your life is worth more than anyone else's. You are the heir of Black," the old man reminded him, gripping his shoulders tightly. "Remind those beneath us why it is we stand above them." Harry swallowed deeply and nodded, receiving a ghost of a smile from his grandfather. Leo stepped forward next, foregoing usual social decorum and pulling him into a tight embrace. He said nothing but gave him a nod of encouragement. Cassie surprised him by following suit and gave him a gentle kiss on the cheek, followed by a wink. His father was a different matter entirely. Gone was the composed man that he had shared breakfast not 15 minutes ago. Sirius was pale, his grey eyes etched with worry. "After everything we've been through, Harry, this should be easy," he said with a weak smile. "I believe in you and I love you, son. Just come back to us, no matter what." Harry pulled the man into his arms and reveled in the warmth of him. Out of them all, his father had been the one to always pick up the pieces, the one to be there for him when he needed it most, and the one that had saved his life more than once. The others had been there, but his father was always first and always would be. "I will," he vowed before turning and entering the tent. The 3 other champions had arrived before him and were each dealing with their nervousness in their own way. Crumb was sat in a chair, his eyes closed with only his stiff posture indicating the tension he was experiencing. Diggory had sequestered himself in one of the corners, As pale as a ghost, he was mumbling under his breath various incantations and shaking his head before moving on to another series of spells. The French champion had taken a more restless approach and was pacing frantically back and forth, her wand already in hand. Harry simply shook his head and leaned the small of his back against a table before crossing his arms and waited for the arrival of the judges. They entered shortly after himself, led by Dumbledore, the usual twinkle in his eye, as prominent as ever as he looked upon the champions. Harry shot the man a glare as Ludo Bagman cleared his throat, his usual boyish grin fixed firmly on his face. "Good morning," he greeted them, trembling in a glee that was not reciprocated. "I bet you are all eager to see what your first task is." The frosty reception he received caused his face to fall, and he faltered for a moment before his grin was back in place. "Well, what you will face is in this bag," he explained as he waved a small red velvet pouch at them. "Your task is to simply retrieve the golden egg. Points will be awarded based on the effectiveness of the magic you use, how well you prevent damage caused to the other eggs, and of course damage to yourself." To Harry it made the task no less dangerous, but more so. Dragons themselves were not amiable creatures, nesting mothers were another thing entirely. He cursed under his breath, as Bagman offered the bag to the French champion first. Things had certainly taken an unexpected turn. "The Welsh green," Bagman announced dramatically. The lack of surprise on Delacour's face told him that she already knew what to expect, and as Diggory and Crumb pulled their own, it was clear they knew also. Seeing that they had pulled the Swedish short snout and Chinese fireball respectively, it left only one for himself, the biggest of the four and the most difficult to handle. He had researched each of the breeds to find their weaknesses. Dragons as whole had very few, but he had formulated a plan for each of them, though the horntail was the one he was least certain of, and the one that posed the most risk. Had he drawn the short snout or the fireball, there was a chance that he could converse with them in parcel tongue, for what good that would do when dealing with an irate, protective mother with her clutch of eggs. Failing that, the fireball was the smallest and could potentially be subdued with transfigured bindings. The short snout was quite bulky and slower than the other three, but the glands in its mouth were a weakness. If he could damage those, it would take away the ability to breathe fire and lessen the danger somewhat. The horntail's weakness was similar but much riskier. It could shoot a jet of flame over 50 feet. Accuracy from outside that range was difficult at best, but he would have to work with it. Other than this, there was no weakness other than the eyes, and attacking them would send it into a rage, potentially damaging the eggs and making the beast unpredictable. He shook his head at the enormity of the task ahead. The other champions had drawn the easier options, though no less dangerous if they did not handle it correctly. The judges left the tent soon after and took Diggory with them. Harry noted that he would be last and decided that he would attempt to settle himself and ponder anything else that would help him. Disillusioning himself would be pointless. The eyesight of the horntail would still see him, and even a scent-masking charm would be of little else. Their sense of smell was exceedingly strong. He sighed as he shook his head, knowing that he would have to incapacitate the creature at the very least. Not something he would willingly walk into, but now that he found himself here, he would give no quarter. He was a black, and he would prove himself worthy of the name. The three Potters took seats amongst the Gryffindor students, each of them silent amidst the chattering students, fearful of what Harry was to face. The organizers had kept the content of the tasks to themselves, and the topic of discussion around them was focused on what they would bear witness to. "What do you think it could be?" Lily questioned as she surveyed the rocky terrain below. "I don't know," James muttered, "but I don't think it's anything good." The cacophony of noise in the stadium was drowned out by an almighty roar, and the revelers fell silent as a dragon was lured into the enclosure. The handlers hurried away the moment the beast was in position. "Dragons?" Lily hissed, her eyes bulging. James shook his head and closed his own as he mothered a silent prayer. Charlie simply whimpered as he looked between his parents, desperately feeling just as hopeless. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice of Ludo Bagman boomed, "welcome to the first task of the Triwizard Tournament." There was no applause as the crowd looked on in a mix of shock and awe. "Each of our champions will enter the arena and face a dragon of their own," he continued. Their task is to retrieve the golden egg that can be seen in the nest, so without further ado, let us begin. Please welcome first, representing Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Cedric Diggory. The boy entered visibly shaking and pale. James took his wife's hand in his own and pulled his youngest son closer, arms circling firmly around his shoulders. For all of them it was much worse than they could have imagined. "If anything happens to Harry, then I will destroy them all," he growled, his eyes blazing in the direction of the judges. "I thought he was joking," Tonks heaved, her breathing frantic, skin pulled tight over the knuckles of her hands as she gripped the front of the barricade herself. The Blacks and Leo were behind. "Joking about what?" Sirius questioned. "He asked me if I knew any way to take down a dragon," she answered, her eyes filled with worry. Sirius chuckled humorlessly. "Some would think you actually care," he offered. Tonks scowled at him. "Not the time for joking, Sirius. Think of it as revenge for the name thing," the man mumbled. "I wanted to hurt him, not see him dead," Tonks seethed. "Calm down," Leo broke in, his own composure slipping. "You're becoming hysterical." "I am not," the metamorph denied furiously, her hair changing from blue to a vibrant red. The calming charm Sirius cast only settled her a little. She fidgeted with her hands as she watched the Diggory boy transfiguring boulders into dogs, hoping that would distract the dragon, her heart racing as she panicked about seeing Harry in the same situation. "Just breathe, Nymphadora," Arcturus advised. The woman frowned but nodded gratefully. Her great-grandfather nor Cassiopeia had acknowledged her existence at all before now, the banishment of her mother from the Black family applying to her also apparently, and she wasn't about to attempt to curse the man for using her name. Her mother had spoken of him and his skill with a wand, and she was not about to put that reputation to the test. Not only would she have him to deal with, her mother's ire would be next despite her status amongst them. She took a deep breath to steady herself, her eyes transfixed on the monster attempting to reduce Diggory to naught but a pile of ash. Harry had abandoned all pretense of being calm. He watched as each champion left and listened to the cheering of the crowd as they managed to claim their prize, all of them taking a considerable amount of time. By the time Crumb had left, he had assumed Delacour's place, frantically pacing backwards and forwards, the adrenaline pumping through his veins in waves. He heard the announcement that the Bulgarian had secured his egg and gave his equipment a final check before slipping on the dragonhide mask. It covered the entirety of his neck and face, leaving only his eyes and top of his head unprotected by the thick but light armor. "An excellent show by the Durmstrang champion," Bagman declared over the applause of the audience. "And finally allow me to give you, representing the House of Black, our fourth champion, Harry Black," Bagman announced. Harry flicked his wand into his hand as he entered the enclosure, the applause much more subdued than for the other champions. He cared not. He was not here for their entertainment, nor adulation. He was here to survive primarily and cement his own legacy too. Gazing upon the beast in front of him only served to increase his adrenaline levels. She was enormous, her snarling maw revealing 2 rows of teeth, each one larger than him, but it was her eyes he was firmly fixed on, 2 pools of amber lava that promised him nothing but pain. He took a step forward only for a gout of flame to be sent his way. He felt the searing heat as he dived behind a nearby boulder, cursing under his breath, as a portion of the armor on his left shoulder and neck bubbled under the heat and the smell of singed hair filled his nostrils. "Shit," he cursed as he doused himself in water, the boiling garment sending up a cloud of steam as it cooled. Thankfully, his skin had only been tinged a pinkish color. The armor had done its job, but the flames of the dragon had left some gaping holes in it. He growled under his breath, and had no doubt that his eyes were now an emerald inferno that would rival the beast. The dragon was rightfully angry, but now so was he. His breathing quickened and nostrils flared as he stepped from behind his shelter to face his foe head-on, any notion of preserving the eggs or the dragon well and truly forgotten. Tonks balked and her legs almost collapsed under her at the sight of the final dragon being coaxed into the arena. The 3 others had been terrifying enough, but this was a monster unto itself. "He's facing that?" she uttered weakly. He'll be okay, Leo comforted her as best he could, though his own countenance was shaky. Tonks shook her head, worrying her lip as her hair cycled between a myriad of colors. She watched as Harry entered the enclosure. At first, nothing happened, and an anticipatory silence fell as the young man and dragon stared at one another, seemingly sizing each other up. She screamed and covered her eyes as the beast released a stream of fire towards Harry and began trembling uncontrollably, the fear she felt becoming too much to handle. She felt a shaking hand come to rest on her shoulder and found herself face to face with an equally concerned Sirius. "He's okay," he assured her, his grip tightening slightly. "I don't think I can watch this," she whispered. Sirius nodded as he wrapped an arm around her. "I can't either," he admitted, "but I can't not." She forced herself to look as the crowd cheered at Harry emerging from behind the boulder he had sought refuge behind, the gaps in his armor visible and eyes alight with a green fire that would render most petrified. She marveled at the fortitude he was showing in the face of adversity. Where others would have given up, he was choosing to persevere. "Why doesn't he just quit?" she asked frantically. "Harry doesn't quit," Leo answered with a shake of his head. "He's a black," Arcturus declared proudly as Harry raised his wand and transfigured the two largest boulders on the field into gargantuan serpents that immediately began slithering towards the dragon, garnering its attention. The dragon breathed fire at the constructs only for them to continue towards it, undamaged by the flames. The creature roared furiously as it swiped at one with his spiked tail, the roar turning into a screech of pain as the snake struck and latched onto the flailing limb. It began winding itself around the rear of the dragon's body as the second one bit into its neck and constricted around the wings and torso. The giant reptile fought ferociously against them, but was eventually pulled to the ground where it continued its futile struggle under the efforts to subdue it. Tonks breathed a sigh of relief as Harry approached the nest, the monster finally stilled, having seemingly been squeezed unconscious by the two serpents. Her sigh, however, quickly gave way to a scream of horror as the dragon's eyes opened and it fought with renewed vigor, its eyes glaring unwaveringly at the teen only feet away. With a roar of biblical proportions, it prepared to release a gout of flame as it broke free from the bindings securing the rear of its body. Harry quickly fired 2 spells into the open mouth of the monster that stalled its attempt, but he was not quick enough to avoid the sweeping tail. It crashed into his left side and sent him sprawling a dozen feet away as the dragon continued to scream in agony. "Harry!" Tonks screamed, her stare fixed on his unmoving form. "What the hell is happening to the dragon?" Cassiopeia questioned. Tonks sobbed as Harry slowly pushed himself gingerly to his feet and glared at the screeching beasts that had wounded him. Only then did she turn her attention to the dragon, her hand covering her mouth as it burst into flames from the inside out. A shocked silence fell upon the crowd as they watched the magnificent creature smolder under its own fire, becoming nothing but a blackened husk, emitting a final pained cry before it fell still once more. Tonks had been enthralled by the sight of the dragon in morbid curiosity and had not noticed Harry leaving the arena. Shaking herself from her stupor, she was the first to exit and headed towards the medical tent, the almost inaudible announcement that the judges would be taking a recess to discuss the development before giving their verdict ringing in her ears. Harry limped into the tent with the egg secured under his arm, his breathing labored and right arm dangling uselessly at his side. The pink-skinned burned uncomfortably as he dropped his prize onto one of the beds and turned to be faced 4 different looks of fear and shock by the champions and the Hogwarts matron. "I could really use some assistance," he gritted out. His outburst spurred the woman into action, and she approached, casting an array of diagnosis charms on him as she did so. Harry collapsed onto the bed, exhausted as he tried to steady his breathing, ignoring his fellow competitors. A broken arm, 4 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and some minor burns. The healer reeled off as she began producing several potions. "Drink these and get lots of rest," she instructed as she began slathering a foul-smelling paste onto his damaged skin. Harry nodded and downed the concoctions, the pressure in his chest lifting soon after leaving behind a dull ache. He grunted in pain when the woman set his left arm with a flick of her wand and finished by bandaging it and placing it in a sling. You should consider yourself very lucky, she sighed. You'll be as good as new in a few days, so long as you apply the ointment every few hours. Thank you, Harry replied gratefully. The woman shook her head in exasperation and went to tend to the other champions as she muttered under her breath. His respite lasted only a few moments after he closed his eyes by the flap of the tent opening and a very flustered Tonks entered. She stormed towards him and almost threw herself in his arms. Are you going to be okay? Is it really bad? She questioned as she forcefully gave him her own examination. I will be if you don't undo the fine work that the healer has done, he chuckled. She had the decency to look abashed as she unhanded him and gave him a stern glare. I see you didn't get a brain injury? Still the same annoying git? She huffed. Or Nymphadora, you wouldn't have me any other way, he returned with a grin. Idiot, she grumbled as her eyes filled with tears, the emotions of the day overwhelming her. Why are you crying? Harry questioned with a frown. I'm not, she denied vehemently, swiping at her eyes angrily. Admit it, you'd miss me just as much as I'd miss you. Tonks shook her head. Don't joke about it. You almost died, she growled as a fresh wave of tears fell despite her wish to stem them. I'm sorry, Harry replied as he took her hand and gave her a smile. You will be, she promised with a glare. Nobody has gotten away with making me cry since I was at school, and you won't be the first, she finished, prodding him sharply in the chest. Harry chuckled as the pair were interrupted by the arrival of the rest of the blacks. Tonks stepped away as Sirius approached and pulled him into a gentle hug. You're okay? He whispered emotionally. Harry nodded. I'm fine, Dad. I just need some rest. Sirius smiled. Good. I'm so proud of you, he mumbled. As are we all, Arcturus interjected. You conducted yourself as a true black, Harry. I can't give you higher praise than that. Harry smiled at the words. A bloody close thing, though, Leo sighed. What the hell happened to the dragon? A question we would all like an answer to. The stern voice of Dumbledore broke in as the 5 judges entered the tent, all of whom sported severe expressions. The dragon tried to kill me, I got it first. Harry answered simply, his eyes blazing at the intrusion. And how did you achieve such a feat, Mr. Black? Crouch spat. The 2 glands in the mouth that released the flammable liquid, I hit them with rupturing curses, he explained with a shrug. It must have tried to breathe fire as it was going down its throat. Crouch shook his head and sighed as Dumbledore and Bagman looked at him in disappointment. Borderline but not illegal, Crouch muttered. Do you mind if we check your wand to confirm it? Only if I can keep hold of it, Harry returned firmly. Crouch nodded his agreement as he cast the Priori Incantatem on the wand, nodding in satisfaction as the last spells cast were revealed. It is as he says, he confirmed. Surely it is still against the rules, Bagman broke in. He killed the dragon. Crouch shook his head. The same rules apply to if a champion is killed. The Ministry is not liable in such an event and the competitor is not punished, should any creatures be maimed or killed during the competition, he explained. I must express my disappointment, Dumbledore sighed. You have no right to express anything, Dumbledore, Arcturus responded angrily. Harry used dark magic during the event, Dumbledore tried. Arcturus was primed to retaliate, but was beaten to it by a fuming Harry who stood and stalked towards the man, pausing only a few inches away. Don't dare start spouting your shit about what you deem to be dark magic, he hissed. I am not here for glory or the prize of 1,000 galleons. I did not enter this tournament in case you in your senile mind forgot. He took a breath, not breaking eye contact with the surprised older man. I can spend 1,000 galleons and forget about it in the next 5 minutes, and I could have come forward any time and told my story, but I never did. I don't want any of this, so please go ahead and disqualify so I can go home and away from you. You narrow-minded fossil. Those gathered in the tent watched the altercation with mixed levels of interest. I wasn't suggesting that we punish you, Dumbledore sighed tiredly, merely pointing out that the magic you used was unsavory. Harry chuckled darkly. I will do whatever I have to survive this farce of a tournament, and if I have to compete, then you shower of bastards had better get used to it. Dumbledore shook his head, gesturing for the other judges to follow him as he exited the tent. Fucking goat, Harry spat distastefully. The other champions, the matron and Tonks, stared at him in shock after his tirade had finished. Though I don't entirely approve of your language, you handled that remarkably well, Arcturus offered with a slight bow. I'm sorry, Harry sighed, but it needed to be said. Should have cursed the bastard, Leo muttered disappointedly. Why do you hate Dumbledore so much? Tonks asked with a frown. Because he's a hypocrite and a scumbag, Harry answered. Now if you don't mind, I really need to get some sleep. He climbed into bed and pulled the duvet over his head, shutting himself away from the world. He felt good for finally shouting at the man, but it did nothing to abate the anger he felt towards him. The rest of the group exited the tent, pondering the events of the day. Why does he hate Dumbledore? Tonks whispered to Sirius. She knew that the man was loved by many and disliked by others, her mother included, but she didn't understand why. He had always been nice from what she knew of him and had sacrificed a lot for the good of the people. Sirius sighed. Has Harry told you about his time with his Muggle relative? Tonks shook her head. Then it's not my place to say, but every bad thing that happened to him can be linked directly to the interfering old git. The metamorph was confused. Harry was usually easygoing when he wasn't so serious. He didn't harbor strong feelings from what she had seen, so Dumbledore must have done something significant for the boy to hold on to so much hate towards him. She knew that he was estranged from his parents and hadn't once mentioned them in her presence. She sighed as she followed the blacks towards the castle. It was not in her nature to pry, so she would wait until Harry was comfortable explaining everything to her, if he would. Right now, she was simply content that he had survived the task and would be okay. Such a thought brought a relieved smile to her face as her own exhaustion began to settle in. The day had been trying, and the only thing she now desired was a hot bath and her bed. First thing in the morning, she fully intended on being in the hospital wing to make sure that Harry was behaving himself and resting as he should be. A 45 is a good score, James commented, as the Potters exited the arena. I don't care about the score, Lily hissed. I just want him to be okay. James nodded and pointed towards the retreating Sirius in the distance. I'll go check with Padfoot, he explained as he took off running towards the man. He caught up a moment later, breathless as he accosted the man. How is he questioned urgently. He'll be fine, Prongs, Sirius assured him, but best keep Dumbledore away for a while. James frowned. I warned the bastard to stay away from him, he growled. What happened? Sirius sighed as he shook his head. He antagonized Harry, just about accused him of using dark magic. James shrugged. It's not against the rules even if he did. What's the old man playing at? I don't know, Sirius grumbled. He'd best forget about it, though. James nodded. Thanks, Pads, he said gratefully. I'll be having words with him. Albus Dumbledore exited his pensieve and took a seat behind his desk, the dressing down he had received from James Potter still fresh in his mind. But it was not that he was pondering. It was thoughts of the man's eldest son that plagued his mind. In only a few short weeks, the boy had proven himself exceedingly gifted, his performance today, though unseemly, standing testament to the observations of himself and the professors that had taught him during his short stay here. He stroked the plumage of his familiar as the words of the prophecy spoken to him many years ago played over in his mind. Did I make a grave error? He questioned the Phoenix. Charlie Potter was a nice boy but would never be able to survive the wrath of Tom when he did eventually resurface. Harry, on the other hand, had proven himself quite capable. The younger of the boys was quite meek, determined, but ultimately inferior to even the most average of witches and wizards. I fear I may have, he sighed, answering his own question. But perhaps all is not lost yet. He popped a lemon drop into his mouth as many thoughts permeated his mind. He had time to solve his dilemma, until the end of the school year at least, to build bridges with the boy. Arcturus Black be damned. Harry was the one the prophecy referred to, and he was needed to end the tyranny of the man that had almost brought wizarding Britain to its knees. I must play this very carefully, folks, he mused aloud. All of our lives may just depend on him.